Thank you for talking to us today about your book Manning Up and the work that you've done leading up to it. There's been a huge amount of interest at the Centre and from our guests in this change in family structures and in the role of fathers and husbands. And I wonder if you could sum up, I guess, the key points that you think are the most important insights in your book.
Number one is that we are now seeing a new stage of life that I call pre-adulthood. It's maybe not the nicest way of terming it. Other people refer to it as extended adolescence. That's, I suppose, more insulting. Or emerging adulthood is the most common official term, a psychological term. This is a stage where young people, generally we think of them in their 20s, are trying to figure their lives out. Now remember, in the past, before we had this very complex and intricate economy, you knew by the time you were in your teens probably what you were going to do because your choices were quite limited. And you weren't expected to go to college. Why would you? Because the jobs that were available wouldn't really require it. That was true up until really the 60s and even into the 70s when we still had a thriving manufacturing sector. But with the emergence of the knowledge economy, what's often referred to as a knowledge economy, the post-industrial economy, education becomes more prominent part of people's life script, and it delays the age of marriage and family for most people. I'll complicate that point in a minute. And there is this period of pre-adulthood where you're trying to figure it out. And my argument in the book is that this is a period that has been very problematic for relations between the sexes because it's not clear what's supposed to happen during that decade. It used to be that boys knew they had a certain role they had to play with women. Take something as simple as dating. You're supposed to call a woman, you're supposed to pick her up, you're supposed to take her somewhere, you're supposed to try to get in her bed, and she's supposed to say no, and the script was there. But that changed with the emergence of pre-adulthood, where women are as much a part of trying to join the labor force, trying to prepare themselves for the labor force as men are, which means that in many cases they're making more money than men. So men say, well, why should I pay for the date? This is one of the primary points of debate on the internet dating sites. Who pays? Who pays for the date? A lot of men say, men are supposed to pay, it makes them feel good. Other men say, why should I pay? She makes more money than I do. So all of these scripts that we used to be able to rely on have been shredded and are making relations between the sexes a little more complicated. And I think are tending to leave boys in particular more confused because their role has been so completely dismantled. It's kind of easy for women to determine how to do well in school and then go into the workplace. It's not so easy for men to then say, well, why should I? I'm not necessarily going to get married. I don't have to support a family because women can do it. And I think it undermines the entire reason for being that young men felt. Yes, you have to prepare yourself to become a husband and father. That's no longer part of the formula for early adulthood or late adolescence.
So what do you think it is how should men be redefining their value in this situation?
I think actually, when I wrote the book, I was a little more pessimistic. That was about 3 years ago. What I've seen now with young people is that they are, college-educated people at any rate, they are redefining the male role to be much more nurturing, much more hands-on with the children. We've seen in the United States, and I suspect this is true here, though I haven't looked at the data, a tremendous increase in the amount of time that men spend with their children. More and more men are marrying women who are earning more than they are and seem okay with that. We're beginning to see data come in that suggests that though at one time those marriages were fragile, where the woman was more successful or at least making more money, it now seems to be evening out a bit. It's not clear completely what's going on. We know that women with more education are marrying down, if you will, and yet those marriages seem to be doing okay. The question that we still haven't quite resolved is what happens when women are actually earning more, especially when the children come. So, and how much how much women are going to be willing to say, okay, I want my husband to take care of the kid, and I'm going to go back to work. How many women are going to want that? I don't know. I think these questions are still up in the air.
I think there seems to be a trend in Sydney at least, which is an odd community in many ways, not typical, where wealthier women have almost a trophy husband who quits his job and stays home with their children. And I was recently at a women's function festival at the Opera House, and most of the women at the table I sat with had husbands who had taken a nurturing role, a homemaking role. Yes. And this was, I'm not sure what to make of it exactly. I think it's great that we have lots of options, but it did seem to me that it does leave you wondering if that can work at scale.
Right, right. I would guess, and you know, the evidence is we're still unfolding, so we don't know for sure, but I would guess that there are some basic biological differences that will keep, as you say, the scale not, well, we won't see 50-50, I think, ever, because the majority of women are going to want more time with the children than the majority of men. Doesn't mean that there are not going to be plenty of the sorts of women you're talking about. I'm seeing it too. Like I said, we're still evaluating just how successful those marriages are. I think that's to be determined. But it is happening. And even among in households where women are still the primary caretaker, men are much more involved with child rearing than they used to be. You know, I see a lot of feminists in the United States who are checking the math very, very carefully about how much time men are spending, and they still say that men are still not doing an equal amount of housework, which is probably true. But I'm not sure that that's a worthwhile way of thinking about it. And the fact is, in the U.S. and everywhere that I've ever read about, and this includes the Scandinavian countries, which are supposed to be the capitals of equality, women spend more time at home and less time at work than men on average. So that's still the case.
Who do you think is more disappointed or happy with this change? Is it men who are put out by the change in gender relations, or is it women who are wondering whatever happened to my big strong man? When people talk to you about these changes, who do you think's more uncomfortable?
I can't really answer that. I wouldn't say one or the other. Really, I've been most struck by the fact that young people are adapting. And again, I want to emphasize, I'm talking about college-educated people here, because in the U.S., at any rate, those are the ones who are far more likely to marry before they have children and to stay married, to have fairly stable, traditional in the sense of, you know, marriage first, then children, staying together, who have that more conventional arrangement, not going on to a new partner or new children by that partner. So those college-educated folks are very middle class in that sense, even if the gender roles have changed quite a bit. Remember, though, when we talk about equality between the sexes, when we talk about men taking on more of a role at home, we are, by definition, leaving out single parents. and they are almost always women. So even if we were to get to 50-50 in every respect in married couples, where he does the laundry and she does the dishes and he does the diapers and she does the feet, even if we were able to get to that point, which I think is questionable, we still have, as I mentioned earlier today, 40% of children being born to unmarried mothers. Some of them are living with boyfriends, but those relationships are very fragile and likely to break up, and those children will stay with the mother, which means that she will be not only primary parent, she'll be in many cases, the only parent, because it often happens that the father fades away, not always, but often.
There's a lot of commonly believed consequences of absent dads, and I think the effects on girls are often speculated about. What does your research tell you about how absence of dads affects kids now?
The effects on boys and girls are rather different. Historically, the research has shown that girls who grow up without a father are far more likely to start sex earlier. Actually, even the most amazing research, the research that surprised me the most, and it's been replicated a number of times, is that girls who grow up without fathers or even with stepfathers in the house begin menstruating earlier than girls who grow up with their fathers in the house, which is kind of staggering when you think about it. It's like nature is responding to some environmental stress in the house. And when I first read this research, I thought, no, that couldn't be. But as I said, it's been replicated, so I suppose there's some truth to it. At any rate, the fact is that girls, we do know this much, girls who grow up without a father in the house start sexual activity earlier and are likely to become pregnant younger and outside of marriage. So that's one major.
Sounds like an intergenerational replication.
Exactly.
And what are the effects on boys?
The boys are also more likely to become unmarried parents themselves. The boys, though, the problems start younger. And they have more to do with school failure, with impulsivity problems. They're acting out more in school. The research refers to the boys as using a lot of externalizing behavior. And what that means is they're more aggressive, they're more restless, they have more trouble controlling themselves, they're getting in trouble more in school or in the neighborhood, in communities, and as they get bigger, they get to be a problem. We see more delinquency among those boys, less school success, and of course less possibilities becoming involved fathers themselves, because they don't have the model, because they've had all of this failure all along.
So what do you think policymakers and concerned people interested in I guess, good social functioning, what should we be talking about and researching more to get a handle on this problem?
Yeah, I think actually that we've done an awful lot to show that the effects of family breakdown on children. The piece of this that I think has not yet been adequately researched is its effect on men. I have a kind of speculative idea about this, that there's almost what I call an existential problem for young men growing up in a society that basically tells them they're optional, that women can have it all on their own if they want. I just was reading a statement by the singer Katy Perry, and she said, I don't need a dude. She was talking about whether she was going to have children. She said, I don't need a dude. It's 2014. And,
she was married to Russell Brand. I'm assuming there's some damage done there.
That is a very good point. You could almost forgive her.
So I guess, you know, this book has really made some waves in Australia. You're here for the Festival of Dangerous Ideas, which, you know, solid indication that people here want to understand this problem a lot better. What will you be telling people at FODI about what is the message here that we need to get to grips with?
Well, I gather that that audience will be somewhat resistant to the idea that the rise of women, as I refer to it in my subtitle, has had a problematic effect for men because it, you know, the expectation or the hope or the need is to see all progress as simple, like a fairy tale. You know, it's going to all be great, you know, and we're going to achieve new levels of equality and happiness, and of course it never quite works out that way. So I think one of the points that I will try to get across is that there are always trade-offs and always unintended consequences. And one of the unintended consequences of feminism has been a tendency to understate the role of men in the family, except as facilitators of women's equality, if you're following what I'm saying. In other words, instead of saying that men are essential to children's lives, to women's lives, it's, well, we need men because they have to do the same amount of work around the house that women do. And you know, feminists often object that they're not man-haters. Of course, you know, I think for the most part they're not. But there has been a tendency to really dismiss men's as their importance in family life and their importance to women. We are interdependent sexually and emotionally and socially. So I think that that's been very underplayed, and that's the point that I'd like to get across when I speak to the people of Sydney.
Fantastic. I think that's very pithily put there at the end. I look forward to hearing it in more detail at FODI. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.